Warhammer 40k has no shortage of crazy fan theories. Some are pure headcanon, others are memes, and then there's a special category, the ones that actually might be true. These aren't just wild guesses. They're ideas with enough canonical hints, enough breadcrumbs in novels and codices that you can't dismiss them outright. And in a setting built on half-truths, imperial propaganda, and deliberate mystery, sometimes the fan theories feel closer to the real story than what's written on the page. In this video, we're diving into the most infamous theories that blur the line between speculation and reality. From the Star Child, the possibility that the Emperor isn't dead, but preparing to be reborn, to the Alpha Legion's secret motives, to the idea that the Tyranids themselves might have been created by a certain species. These aren't fringe conspiracies. They're stitched into the fabric of the lore. And as we move through each one, you'll see how they connect. From gods rising and falling, to Xenos shaping the future of the galaxy, to the Emperor's own secret plans. Because in 40k, the scariest possibility isn't that these theories are wrong, it's that they're true. If there's one theory that refuses to die, it's this: the Emperor isn't gone forever. For all the agony of the Golden Throne and the endless sacrifices it demands, whispers persist that his story isn't finished, that he will rise again. Depending on who you ask, this belief takes many forms, some sounding almost credible, others drifting into half-mythic prophecy. But when you start looking closely, you realize that the seeds of his return are buried everywhere in the lore. The most famous of these is the Star Child theory. First floated back in the realms of Chaos books, it suggests that a fragment of the Emperor's soul, what some call the Numen, escaped into the warp at the moment of his near death on the vengeful spirit. Unlike the tortured husk locked onto the throne, this shard is free, luminous, and growing stronger. The theory goes that when the time is right, this soul fragment could be reborn into the material galaxy, inhabiting a new body or being channeled back into his own. Whole sects within the Inquisition, most famously the Thorians and later the Illuminati, have obsessed over this idea. They actively hunt for perpetuals, psychic vessels, or chosen children who might carry that spark. That's not just fringe conspiracy stuff either. This is backed by canon references across decades of lore. Then there's the perpetual angle. The Horus Heresy novels finally gave us the term for what many suspected all along. The Emperor was one of those rare humans who simply cannot die. Perpetuals like Elanius Persson or John Grammaticus are already proven to resurrect after death, sometimes against their will. If those figures can walk out of the grave, what's stopping the Emperor, the greatest psychic being humanity has ever produced, from doing the same? The difference is scale. While a normal perpetual might wake up in their own body, the Emperor could reincarnate through the warp itself, dragging a shard of his own power back into the materium. If nothing else, the concept makes his eventual return feel less like fan fiction and more like a grim inevitability. Of course, there's the spicier take. Maybe this was his plan all along. Some interpretations suggest the Emperor allowed his death, or at least didn't resist it fully, because he knew resurrection or rebirth was possible. After all, this is a man who spent millennia playing 5D chess with gods and mortals alike. The idea that he foresaw Horus's betrayal, or at least the chance that it would end with him in a position to ascend, is strangely consistent with the way the Emperor operates. Even in heresy-era texts, he tells his sons that sacrifice is necessary for the future of mankind. What greater sacrifice could there be than the death of his own body, paving the way for something even more transcendent. So, is it plausible? Shockingly, yes. Between the Star Child, the perpetual framework, and the idea of a long game we can't fully grasp, there's real canon support for the Emperor's eventual return. The question isn't whether it could happen, it's whether Games Workshop will ever actually pull the trigger. And if they do, it won't just be a resurrection. It'll be the moment the galaxy breaks in half again. If you ask most people about the Alpha Legion, the story goes something like this. They turn traitor, they're sleazy, they shout Hydra Dominatus, and then they vanish into the shadows. But the deeper you look into their lore, the less straightforward that story becomes. In fact, there's a long-running theory that Alfarius and Omegon didn't fall in line with Horus out of loyalty to Chaos, but because they believed there was a third option hidden in the war. One that might, in some twisted sense, still serve the Imperium. The foundation for this idea is Dan Abnett's novel Legion. In it, Alfarius and Omegon are approached by the Cabal, a shadowy alliance of alien species who claim to have glimpsed the future. The Cabal tells the twins that if the Emperor wins the heresy, humanity will survive, but at the cost of spreading chaos across the entire galaxy for all eternity. If Horus wins, by contrast, humanity will burn out quickly, but chaos will eventually starve without mankind to feed on. For the Cabal, the better option is clear. Let Horus win, so chaos can die with him. And against all expectations, Alfarius and Omegon seem to accept that argument. From that moment on, the Alpha Legion's motives become a matter of interpretation. Were they serving Horus, serving chaos, or playing the longest, strangest game of them all, believing that betraying the Imperium would ultimately save it? That's where Omegon in particular becomes fascinating. Some pieces of lore, scattered across novels, codexes, and fan-dissected fragments, hint that Omegon may have been sabotaging the traitors while pretending to be one of them. For example, the Alpha Legion set up vast communication pylons during the heresy that blocked loyalist messages. But there are accounts of those pylons being destroyed later in just the right way to let White Scar's forces receive word of Horus's betrayal. Was that deliberate sabotage by Omegon, or just one more layer of Alpha Legion misdirection? No one knows for certain, but the timing has fueled speculation for decades. And it's not just one event. The Alpha Legion's entire style of warfare lends itself to these theories. They infiltrated the Raven Guard, disguised themselves with surgical grafts, and meddled in gene seed research, operations that could be read as treachery or as ways of strengthening humanity for what's to come. Add to this the simple fact that Alfarius and Omegon were never caught worshipping the Chaos Gods in the same way as other legions, and you start to see why many fans argue the twins were never truly traitors at all. Instead, they may have been playing a role, pretending to fall in line with Horus, while quietly steering events in ways only they understood. At the end of the day, the Alpha Legion's loyalty is one of Warhammer's great open questions. Were they Chaos champions, reluctant villains, or the Emperor's darkest contingency plan? The answer, of course, is Hydra Dominatus, which is to say, they'll never tell you. When you think Tyranids, the image is usually simple: endless alien swarms devouring biomass, stripping planets to the bone, and moving on like galactic locusts. But dig deeper into the lore, and you find something stranger and potentially far more terrifying. Tyranids don't just eat flesh, they suffocate the warp itself. The shadow in the warp, that psychic smothering field generated by Tyranid fleets, blinds psykers, strangles demons, and in some cases cuts whole regions of space off from the immaterium. And nowhere is that more obvious than in Hive Fleet Kronos. Kronos is the Tyranid splinter fleet that does the unthinkable. It actively hunts chaos. When demonic incursions or tainted worlds appear, Kronos is drawn to them, adapting its swarms specifically to shut down psychic phenomena and annihilate demonic forces. Codexes spell this out clearly. Kronos wasn't just a random mutation, but a fleet seemingly specialized in countering warp-based threats, which naturally raises the question: if the Tyranids can already smother psychic power and cut demons off from the warp, what's stopping them from evolving even further? What happens when they adapt to not just suppress chaos, but consume it? Some theorists even take this further and ask whether the Tyranids were created, or perhaps unleashed, for exactly this purpose. If there was ever a proto-chaos rising in the warp before the current pantheon of gods, could the hive mind have been a weapon designed to strangle it in its cradle? After all, the Tyranids are a perfect anti-chaos organism. They can feed on the same mortal populations that empower the gods, while simultaneously choking demons and psykers in the field. They deny chaos the fuel it needs and adapt in real time to counter warp phenomena. Whether by accident or design, they are the ultimate predators for both real space and the immaterial. Now, whether that means they'll eventually grow strong enough to consume actual gods is another debate, one I've already dedicated an entire video to, so stick around for that. But even without going that far, Kronos proves something important. The Tyranids aren't just a threat to the Imperium or to Xenos empires. They're one of the only forces in the galaxy that can directly starve chaos, silence it, and burn away its footholds. And that possibility alone makes them far more than just another hungry swarm. The Siege of Terra wasn't just the climax of the Horus heresy, it was almost the birth of a new god. As the Emperor squared off against Horus, who was swollen with the raw power of all four ruinous powers, he needed to raise himself to the same level. He siphoned humanity's will, his own boundless psychic might, and even the terror of the moment, into a torrent of warp energy. Enough, in theory, to casually erase the War Master. But here's the catch. In doing so, the Emperor may have been walking directly into a trap. That much psychic force, that much desperate belief and raw emotion could have crystallized into something new, a chaos god. And in the whispers of forbidden texts, that entity has a name, the Dark King. The theory runs that the Chaos Pantheon isn't necessarily capped at 4. The 8-pointed star of chaos hints at something else, that there may be 8 slots for beings of godlike warp power, with only half currently filled. If that's true, the Emperor's surge of godlike power at Terra was more than just a one-time flex. It was an ascension in progress. Had he fallen fully into the trap, the Emperor might have become the very thing he sought to destroy, the 5th Chaos God, the Dark King, feeding not on lust or rage or decay, but on domination, control, and the desperate need for order. The ultimate irony, the savior of mankind becoming the tyrant god of mankind. And it doesn't stop with him. The warp is littered with pretenders to the throne. Malice, or Malal depending on the interpretation, is often presented as an outsider god, a god of anarchy and self-destruction who may already be on the cusp of full apotheosis. Vashtor the Archiphane, the machine demon, is explicitly described as climbing the ladder of power, carving a niche of his own in the immaterium. Both could represent rival claimants to those open slots on the 8-pointed star. And if the Emperor almost ascended by accident, who's to say the birth of another god, or several, isn't inevitable as the galaxy spirals further into war. The frightening part is this: it might not even be a matter of choice. The Chaos Gods aren't made, they happen. When belief, emotion, and raw psychic resonance hit critical mass, a god coalesces, whether it's wanted or not. And if the Emperor, a being already worshipped by quadrillions, already the psychic lighthouse of humanity, almost stumbled into that fate, then the Dark King might not be theory at all. He might be an inevitability that simply hasn't hatched yet. Among the stranger theories about the Emperor's past lies the legend of the Dragon of Mars. According to fragments of Mechanicus myth and imperial lore, Mars has always been haunted by something vast, ancient, and dangerous. Some claim this dragon is none other than a fragment of the Void Dragon, one of the dreaded star gods who once feasted on suns before the Necrons shattered them into shards. Supposedly, long before the Great Crusade, the Emperor confronted this being on Terra itself, subdued it, and entombed it beneath the surface of Mars. If true, the implications are staggering. The Emperor was already grappling with galaxy-spanning cosmic forces before humanity had even reached the stars again. What makes this idea compelling is not just the drama of the Emperor wrestling a star god, but how neatly it ties into the cult and culture of Mars. The Adeptus Mechanicus is built on an almost religious obsession with machines, to the point where its adepts will cut away their own humanity and replace it with circuitry and steel. That kind of zealotry, some argue, reeks of something more than simple ideology. It feels like some sort of psychic radiation of a divine shard, whispering from deep underground. If the Void Dragon's essence still thrums beneath Mars, it would explain why an entire planet of humans grew into a machine-worshipping priesthood. Now, depending on how you look at it, this could have been the Emperor's plan all along. Perhaps he locked the dragon there deliberately, knowing the cult that formed in its shadow would one day serve as the perfect Forge World foundation for his empire. Or perhaps it was simply an accident, a cruel cosmic joke, where the Emperor's greatest foe became humanity's industrial backbone. Either way, the influence is undeniable. The machine cult's devotion to their so-called omniscire may not be divine revelation at all, but the lingering dreams of a shattered god imprisoned in red dust and iron. When it comes to Eldar myth, nothing is ever simple. Ynnead, the so-called god of the dead, is supposed to be their salvation, the ultimate weapon against Slaanesh. And in strict canon, that's already baked in. Every Eldar soul locked inside spirit stones or craft world infinity circuits feeds this nascent entity, inching it closer to a true awakening. Add to that the sheer psychic weight of prophecy and belief, the Inari, the mystics, even figures like Eldrad Ulthran outright declaring this future, and Ynnead is practically willed into being by the hope of an entire species. The Eldar know that belief shapes the warp, and they're pouring everything into the idea that death itself will save them. But there's a darker theory lurking here, and it starts with how Ynnead looks. The Incarn, its avatar in real space, isn't some spectral god of final peace. It looks unnervingly like a demon of Slaanesh. The lithe, almost predatory silhouette, the flowing hair, the grace mixed with menace. It's easy to look at the Incarnate and wonder if the Eldar have simply re-sculpted Slaanesh in a mask of hope. After all, Slaanesh was born from the death throes of their species, from their ecstasy and despair entwined. Ynnead is being born from exactly the same pool of psychic energy, just routed through infinity circuits instead of spilling raw into the warp. The symmetry is uncanny. two gods birthed by Eldar excess, only with different branding. And this is where the theory splits into two paths. The optimistic one says that the connection is exactly what will allow Ynnead to triumph. If Ynnead is death made manifest, sculpted from every lost Eldar soul with the explicit purpose of countering Slaanesh, then the overlap gives it a conceptual edge. Slaanesh feeds on Eldar souls, but Ynnead is built from those same souls held back, denied to her. That makes Ynnead not just Slaanesh's rival, but her mirror, a god designed in opposition, born to be the reaping of the one who reaps. The other path is far more sinister, that the similarity isn't rivalry at all, but continuity. That Ynnead isn't a separate being, but just another mask of Slaanesh, the perfect manipulation. If so, every Eldar who thinks they're saving their soul in a spirit stone is actually feeding their tormentor in a different guise, strengthening Slaanesh's hold while believing they're resisting it. The Incarnate's beauty, menace, and eerie similarity to a keeper of secrets might be the first hint that the Eldar have built their own doom, wrapping it in prophecy and worship. Ynnead, in this interpretation, is not the god of the dead, but the god of the damned. Whether the future ends with Slaanesh devoured or the Eldar tricked into empowering her forever, the truth is, the two gods are entangled. They were both born from the same dying race, and the Eldar's belief that salvation comes through death might be the cruelest trap chaos has ever sprung. The common wisdom is that the Tyranids are alien beyond comprehension, predators from another galaxy with no history in the Milky Way. But there's a persistent theory that flips this assumption. The Tyranids aren't outsiders at all, but one of the last creations of the Old Ones during the war in heaven. If the Old Ones could sculpt entire species, the Eldar and their green and mean cousins, why not something even more extreme? A final, scorched earth weapon designed to devour the Necrontyr and their masters, or perhaps to cleanse the galaxy itself once the Old Ones realized their empire was collapsing. There's a compelling hook here. The Necrontyr only turned to their gods for immortality when the war was going badly enough that no conventional strategy could win. Imagine the Old Ones unleashing a weapon like the Tyranids, a hive intelligence that eats everything, learns from every foe, and snuffs out the warp by sheer psychic presence. Suddenly, the Silent King's desperate gamble with the star gods makes sense. The Tyranids may have been the final straw, a predator even the soulless Necrons couldn't outlast. The irony is that the Necrons bought immortality only to curse their souls forever, while the Tyranids may have been driven out into the intergalactic void once their grim work was finished. It also explains something strange. The shadows of Tyranid-like creatures already scattered across Imperial history. Fenris has its Kraken. Catachan is filled with life forms that feel suspiciously like miniature bioweapons, and even the most xenobiological texts describe eerie parallels between the galaxy's most hostile flora and fauna and the Tyranid's arsenal. These could be remnants, fragments of an ancient Tyranid presence seeded into ecosystems long ago. If the Old Ones really did unleash the hive fleets, perhaps they left spores behind, genetic echoes of the galaxy's ultimate predators. And if the Tyranids weren't made to fight the Necrons, then maybe they were built for something worse. Chaos. They are, after all, perfectly tailored for it. They feed on the same nutrients that fuel the gods. They suppress the warp through the shadow, blind demons and psykers, and operate through a collective hive mind so unified that corruption is almost impossible. Tyranids don't fall to chaos. They compete with it and in many ways outperform it. To some theorists, This is the real reason they exist, as a countermeasure to proto-chaos, birthed before the ruinous powers had fully coalesced. If that's true, then the destruction of the Pharos beacon during the Horus Heresy may not have attracted an alien empire at all. It might have reactivated a long-forgotten failsafe, a species that had been deliberately cast out into the void, its purpose fulfilled, suddenly awoke to find the galaxy boiling with chaos again. And like any good weapon, the Tyranids returned to finish the job. So there you have it, from the whispered prophecies of the Emperor's return, to the eldritch shadow of the Dragon of Mars, to the terrifying possibility of a fifth Chaos God. The galaxy is overflowing with mysteries that might never be resolved. Theories like the Old One's hand in creating the Tyranids, whether as a weapon against the Necron-Tyre or even as an anti-chaos failsafe, show just how deep and dangerous their legacy might truly run. And the potential connection between Ynnead and Slaanesh reminds us that even the salvation of a species can come wrapped in a curse, or worse, a lie. What all of these stories have in common is the same thing that makes Warhammer 40k so endlessly fascinating. Nothing is certain, nothing is safe, and every answer just spawns more questions. The Emperor might rise again, the Tyranids might be the Old One's final gamble, Ynnead might be Slaanesh in disguise, or none of it might ever come to pass. That's the beauty of this universe. It thrives on doubt, on legends, and on the endless debates that keep fans like us coming back. If you enjoyed this dive into the stranger corners of Warhammer lore, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more, and let me know in the comments which of these theories you find most convincing. And hey, if you want me to explore even more insane rabbit holes, you know what to do. This is only the beginning.